Welcome back to The Outright Effect, a podcast in which unique perspectives challenge us to be better versions of ourselves. I'm Tempsy.
And I'm Shelly.
And today we're talking about finding community, really what that means for each of us, what that means. We have these ongoing themes of what that means from a work perspective or professional perspective, what that means with your family, and what that means with your friends. I feel like that comes up a lot in our discussion. So we're going to be touching on all of those things and really talking about what's important to us too when it comes to finding our close-knit group of people that we have around us.
All right. So for me, finding community just generally means having a network of some sort, whether it be family, a friend group, work group, colleagues, people who have similar hobbies or interests, people basically that you can go and do stuff with. And I think those are also a great group of people that you can talk to about something if you need to. And it should be people that you feel like you know pretty well and are comfortable with so that you can have these kinds of conversations. So I wouldn't consider, for me, my community to be acquaintances per se. I mean, I think for other people, if you include that in what you define community as, I think that's totally fine. But for me personally, I like the first thing that comes to mind when somebody asks me like who's part of my community, it's always people who I'm interacting with frequently and people who I am comfortable with talking openly with. What about you, Tempsy? What's community to you?
Pretty much the same thing. It's not much different. But I wanted to ask you, are you the type of person who has a lot of friends, not talking acquaintances, but people that you consider friends, or just a few people that you consider close friends?
So I would say I'm a person who has a lot of friends, but fewer close friends, for
Yeah.
sure. And yeah, so but at the same time too, like let's say for example, I can definitely see other scenarios where I consider community something else because I think people think of community as like where you live, like that kind of stuff, like what is it like near your home, but also kind of breaking it down into like a work community or maybe just depending on things that you're interested in, like let's say for example maybe Tempsy and I have talked previously before about like more entrepreneurial kind of stuff. So there are smaller communities within groups like that as well, that I do feel like I think in those cases, I feel more comfortable talking about like targeted topics, I guess I'll call it, in that kind of situation. That when you're coming to these groups, you're probably talking about work or something like that. Some personal stuff might be layered in there a little bit, but not a ton. But that doesn't mean that those relationships could, down the line change into like a closer friendship or anything like that. So I think that, in some ways, defining community, it is kind of like forever evolving, I guess, just depending on what's going on. But yeah, I mean, sorry, that was a very general explanation.
No, that's totally fine. I'm very similar. I feel like pretty much the same thing in terms of my definition of community for myself. And I'm the type of person who has very few really good close friends. There are other people outside of that small group that I would consider friends. They're people that I trust in general, and I like talking to them and having good conversation with them. But I have a small group of really close friends that I talk to the most and confide in. They're kind of like a sounding board too. They can be that kind of thing for me. So yeah, I agree pretty closely with what you consider to be your community. And I've also noticed that I often make friends, like at work, other than my friends from like when I was younger. But because that's where I spent most of my time, a lot of friends have come out of the professional scenario. And the people even before that, like from when I was younger, it was those that I met at school, right? Because you're there for most of your time. And so, that's kind of, I've noticed I don't kind of go to the gym and meet a person and become a really good friend with that individual. I've met people at like airports before and I'm like, oh, that person's really nice. I could see myself being a friend with them. But the amount of time that it takes to keep in touch with somebody like that, especially if they live far away, I have a hard time with that. I'm not really good at that kind of thing. So I'm not good at keeping making plans or keeping in touch with people just randomly. And so I've found that I'm just the type of person that just needs a few close knit people that I spend my time with. And this is even before I had a kid. This is not like, all of a sudden I had a kid, so I just haven't had time. Like I've had less time, but no, I've always had a hard time keeping in touch with people and, being the one to initiate hanging out.
Yeah, and I think that also changes over time too. Like, I mean, I definitely, thinking back today versus maybe when I was in college or something like that, I think that definitely has changed as far as interaction with friends, frequency wise, right? I feel like I see people a lot less, which is totally fine. I mean, I get it. We're all like living our own lives and stuff now. But, I think back then, like, school probably got out before work gets out, and you had less things to do, less errands to run, less bills to pay or whatever. But so you had more, social time overall. But yeah, I mean, things just change.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons that, people like you and I stay friends is because you're the type of person who initiates things like doing stuff, making plans, and I'm the type of person who doesn't necessarily do that unless there's some big milestone or something or like a celebration, then I invite, my closest friends. But I feel like there are people in this world who are the people who make plans and invite other people, and there are the people in this world who just that's not something that they're good at, and so they're friends with those other people.
It's a balance.
Yeah, definitely. Does family play a part in your community?
So I guess it depends. Like, I would say throughout my life, I've definitely seen people I know, friends, classmates, or whoever, where it seems to me like family plays a huge role, like a very significant role in their lives, and in within their community. Like, I know I've definitely had friends who are like, I always talk to my parents about this or that, or like this close cousin or something like that. But for me, my family is very small, and I think maybe it's because we're like split up so much. Like, geographically, we're not very close to each other. There's a lot of people in different states and that kind of thing. We're like, pretty extensive, like, committed travel is involved in order to see each other. So I think, those are elements that come into play where my family isn't so close, and I wouldn't necessarily consider them to be part of my like close knit community. But also, I mean, we could consider this maybe an Asian stereotype as well, because I grew up and I'm part of like a Asian American household. Granted, it's not like my parents are super traditional or anything like that, but I think, Asian people, and Asian culture, it's like you don't share that much. I would say, like, you don't like share a lot. You mostly keep things to yourself. Sometimes you ask your parents things, but it's a lot more like functional. Like I would say, like, hey mom, I'm getting a new job, or like, hey mom, I got a promotion. But I wouldn't ask her like, what do you think about that? Do you think I should take it? Like, what are pros and cons? And I think also, like, part of the reason that maybe plays into why I don't like seek advice from my family first is because, I mean, I think there's a giant generational gap between me and my parents, where we just like grew up in a different world from each other, and things that we would think about or consider when making decisions like this or whatever are just totally different. Like, we grew up very different from each other. I think, like, there's a 40-year gap in there, so that's also very different. So I think, sometimes I'm like mentioning something and they're like, no, that's a bad idea. I'm thinking like, 40 years ago it might have been a bad idea. Today, not such a bad idea. So
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I've seen that with child rearing too. My in-laws, they're like, we raised kids before, we know what's going on. It was like, well, you raised kids 35 years ago, not to throw my husband under the bus, but things have changed. Things have changed a lot, and there's a reasons why, certain professionals or subject matter experts of kids have put certain things or told us things about raising children and what you should and shouldn't do because of things that have happened in the past that they don't want repeated. So it's funny that there's the big gap that prevents you from confiding in them about whatever. For me, family, it does play a part, but I truly believe that they don't necessarily have to, per se. Like, kind of what you were saying, the family members that I am close to now have been close to me for a really long time. And those that aren't, it's not because I don't want them in my life. It's just that we all have our own lives and immediate family members that we're placing our focus on. So we don't really have time to focus in other areas. And for a long time I felt pretty bad about it, but I've kind of learned to be okay with it. I feel more bad because when things come up for them, like they have weddings and stuff, and I can't go because I just had a kid, and they're having a wedding really far away, and it's just not a good time. And then I feel like, shoot, probably should be closer with those individuals. I feel bad, but then I'm like, they have their own lives. I have mine. I want to support them in as much as possible, but I have to do what's right for me and my family. And so, it's something that I definitely struggle with, but there are some family members that I've purposely distanced myself from, people that I don't really like feel I have the same values as, and I don't necessarily feel like I need to contribute energy towards that relationship. I don't feel like it's something that it's not really necessarily that blood is thicker than water, I guess, in my opinion. Um, yeah, and that may be something that people don't want to hear, but I think that there's other people out there like that as well. And I just want to be honest. Like, I think that you get to decide who you want to have in your life, and if there's destructive people in your life that you don't think are doing you, it's doing you good to have them in their life, it's actually hurting you, then don't have them in your life. It's okay.
Yeah, and so kind of like, related to that, I think that's why, I mean, also being an only child, right? I didn't have any siblings or anything like that. So I consider my friends to be family members that I picked. So I would say my friends, like close friends, and I choose each other, treat each other like siblings, as if we're like sister, brother, sort of, like that kind of environment. And I think in that way, you sort of like curated your family a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
So you then have people you're around who you resonate with or support or like understand where they're coming from and like that kind of thing. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with that either. I will say that I may not have necessarily purposefully distanced myself from people in my actual family, right? But I think because we were never close to begin with, and then maybe we don't currently share values now, I'm not going to take the time or trouble to then try to foster these relationships with someone I was never close with and now don't even agree with. Like that to me doesn't really make a lot of sense. And that just sounds like a lot of drama and stress. So we'll just skip out on that. I like to live drama and stress free.
No, I agree. The people that I've purposefully distanced myself from are those individuals that I've never really been close with, and so that's kind of, it's in the same realm.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So as far as work communities go, I would say, recently with my current job, I've been a part of like different internal groups that have been like working towards a similar goal. And I think that definitely forms like a micro community within itself, right? So one is like the entire organization as a whole. And then this is like a group that I work on specific projects with, but also people who maybe are in your department that you sit next to, or that, if you don't have an office, people who you're constantly working as a team with throughout the day in order to get your work done. And I think like having, trust within that group and like, really supporting each other ultimately at the end of the day helps you, right? Helps you feel good about like, hey, I'm able to get my work done. Helps you feel good about people around you. These guys are helping me too. And we're all like, checking that ultimate goal off of our list of getting whatever it is done, but you're also helping the organization. So I think it's interesting how like work communities sort of like roll up in that kind of way. And also I think it's totally fine. Like I personally have never gotten a job with the goal of like making friends at work. And I do think that's like an organic process that happens. Like you happen to find these people who are you're like similar to or connect with or whatever. And then you end up talking about like whatever your interests are and all that kind of stuff. Like whether it be like sports or shopping or like you both have kids or you both have pets or whatever the case might be, you start hanging out outside of work. I think that is a good like organic process of like making friends because at this point in our lives we're not going to school anymore. And all those people we used to sit in a classroom are doing something else probably. So yeah, I think that's interesting as well, and something that I think is really important for anybody. One thing I will say though, something that I noticed is, so I would say my current profession or career path or whatever you want to call it has to do with being in human resources. And something that I found is that I feel like people in HR roles may have a more challenging time, maybe like making friends at work. And that might sound weird to people, but I think there is like this underlying like stereotype about like the HR person telling on you or something like that. You know, like people just don't feel comfortable with sharing things, or they say something and they're like, wait, hold on, I didn't mean it in a way where I'm trying to get somebody in trouble or something, or myself in trouble, right? Where, you know, so I think that's an interesting thing that I've noticed being in an HR role is that, you know, the work community, I feel like is definitely more focused on actually getting work done than making friends at work. So usually I'd say, well, for myself, my experience has been, and I can't speak for other people, but my experience has been is like if you're in HR, the closest people you are in your organization is probably also HR people.
Which is funny because you and I met at work.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, and the whole company was HR.
Right. So basically, we're like operational employees at the time providing HR services to other companies. So in that case, I think that's a little bit different, right? Like, whereas, you know, that company had a person who you would go to for your issues. But now I'm that person that people would come to with their issues.
And the funny thing is, you were mentioning, common interests. I don't think that you and I necessarily had common interests per se, but I feel like we found over time just talking to each other, you had been there for a little bit longer than I had. And so you were able to, provide me insights that I needed to learn and get trained up. And over time, just spending that time together made me realize anyway that we had similar values in general, and that
Mhm.
I felt like, you know, you could challenge me in certain ways and aspects, and I don't know, something about people who have similar values to me and also challenge me are people that I'm drawn to, and make I end up being close friends with those individuals. Like, I just feel like that's what I notice about many friends that I have, whether they're the close friends or the friends that are, good friends but just not the close knit group. I feel like that's something that's really important to me, not intentionally. It's like a subconscious thing. But I think spending that much time at work with the people that are around you gives you the opportunity to kind of say, like, you know, who do I want in my life? You can build that group of people around you based on, how they work maybe, or how they interact with others. Cause there's been some people that I work with where I'm like, I want nothing to do with that person outside of work, and not to be mean, just like, I know that that is not going to be healthy for my life, or it's not going to contribute to the goals that I'm looking to accomplish, or whatever the case might be. But, you know, I just got to make sure I don't put people in my life that are going to be toxic.
Yeah, and I think that, whether you may have consciously been reflecting on that or not, at the time or maybe now or whatever, but, I think it's a good process for people to consider if they don't know why they maybe have a lot of drama. You know what I mean? Because then if you're saying like, I feel like I've connected with people who challenge me, who like we have similar things that resonate or whatever, like that kind of stuff. Whereas some other people out there might just be like trying to force a friendship because they think someone's cool, but none of those things come into play, right? So I think that's a good like reflective process for people to go through. I don't want to say like while you're picking your friends, but in some cases maybe, right? Because I feel like this probably came up a lot when we were a lot younger, maybe like 10 or 15 years ago when we were having like these issues, right? Like I just really want to be friends with this person, but I don't know why it's not working.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I have been asked, why do you need people who only add value to your life? And I thought that was a real question, like weird question, because I'm like, why not? But she was like, well, why can't you just be friends with someone to be friends with someone? And I'm like, I can, but I don't know. Something inside me really wants to have people around me who challenge me and make me better. And it's not their responsibility to make me better. They just naturally do that because of who they are. And I really am drawn to that. And I'm okay with that. Okay, so we've talked about the family aspect, the professional aspect, what community really means to us. I think one thing that we wanted to talk about was boundaries, and how do you balance, your personal life with your immediate family, that core group, and what boundaries do you hold? What about you, Shelley?
Well, I would say for me, the boundaries are pretty flexible. Actually, I there was a while where I was maybe going out too much. Not, I don't want to say going out like I'm partying because I feel like that's automatically what people think. Tempsy's laughing at me. I can see her on this webcam right now. But like, yeah, I would just, schedule a lot of things to keep myself busy, right? So I'm a person who likes to stay busy. Whether I'm just like walking around at the mall or like, hanging out with people or whatever. I mean, obviously right now it's April 8th, so we can't be doing anything like that. It's 2020. There's a pandemic. We're all staying at home. And I'm realizing that like staying at home and doing nothing is actually kind of okay. So, probably going to incorporate a little bit more of this into my life once we are released back into the real world. But I mean, prior to, having any of these restrictions, I guess like, generally speaking, I feel like my life is pretty flexible. I have the time to like do what I want when I want to do it. That sounds like I'm a rebel. I'm really not. But, so I felt like, generally speaking, I think someone in my situation or like looking at my situation, someone might think, Shelly has a pretty like balanced life, not a lot of restrictions. But I feel like I took that to another level and just made myself too busy. But yeah, I don't know. What about you, Temsi? How do you feel like, your thoughts are around this for your life?
I feel like I do struggle a lot with this because I don't have as much flexibility in the sense that I want to make sure that my son is taken care of and that my husband, is taken care of as well, and he takes care of me just the same. But I think the thing that I struggle with really is in the professional arena is holding my boundaries when it comes to work. Because like I said before, I'm pretty big workaholic, so I'll just keep working. Something about working and getting stuff done in the professional arena is more, I'm drawn to that more than I am, doing those things that absolutely need to get done for the home life, if that makes sense. And so for me, I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from. Like, why is there a need to, you know, get things done at work? And it's like it's like a non-negotiable, right, to get it done. Whereas at home, I've had to learn to kind of put that same mindset in place because I've never had to do that before. And I've talked about this in the past. I never thought I was going to have kids. My husband used to work at night in the restaurant. I used to work during the day. I still work during the day, but we had separate schedules. So we only saw each other on the weekends. So during the week, I was so open and could do whatever I wanted. And now it's totally different. And so I have to really work on why I understand why I put so much uh, weight towards work and figure out how I can apply that mindset to home and make sure I'm putting my boundaries at work and also take care of myself. And that's the balance, right, that I struggle with. But there are times where it comes up where I need to, hold boundaries when it comes to friends and family, but it's mostly work. And I've been working on it for 2.5 years, and I'm just still making sure I try to work on it, but it takes time. And with balance, like, everybody has self-care in a different, or values self-care in a different way. I want to transition into this because, like, my husband, he's all about family, which is amazing, but he wants to be with family all the time. But I feel that there's value in spending time with friends, even for him. I feel like there's value in him caring for himself, whether that's being with his friends, or practicing jujitsu, or whatever it is that he had as hobbies in the past. Those things are important for him to kind of be on his own and do his own thing, so that when he comes back, he can be the best version of himself. And for me, that comes in the form of alone time. I'm just the type of person who, self-care for me is just spending a little bit of quiet time alone. It's a time to reflect. There's no agenda or schedule, like that kind of situation, for at least 5 hours. I know that's a lot, but for me, like, having no schedule for 5 hours, I would just heal so much, just reflecting, journaling, thinking, because when you're in a day where you're constantly doing tasks, or, constantly interacting with people, I feel I rejuvenate from having that quiet alone time. And I don't get it very often, to be super honest. I might get little bits and pieces here, like when I'm running errands, I get alone time and I get to, like, just be with myself. And, but by the time I get into the grocery store, I'm now thinking about what are all the things that I need that maybe outside of the list that I created. So it doesn't really do the job per se, but it does help a little bit when I get to run errands on my own. One time I went to the beach for several hours by myself, and I had this like little half tent that I could sit under but still see the ocean. And I just journaled, and it was really, really nice. Another time I did it in Vegas. So I went to a casino pool, and I just people watched and journaled. And I think my mom was watching my son, and I just got to be alone. And it was really, really nice. And I felt so much better. I was like such a happier person after, and came back and I had so much energy. So I think not everybody needs this, but for me, it's definitely something that I need.
Talking about your example of when you had some alone time to like, be outside or journal and like all that kind of stuff. I recently was listening to this podcast, and I mean, I have been hearing things about this occasionally here and there, not regularly. I'm not actively searching for this information, but something that I do find intriguing is when people go on like wellness retreats and stuff like that. Like that's something that I'm kind of curious about, and maybe at some point, I don't know, maybe look into it or whatever. But I guess that's something that comes to mind when somebody gives that sort of example of like the reflection and journaling and that kind of thing. So I mean, I can see how it can definitely be helpful. So I did go on a drive by myself, just kind of listen to music, like whatever I wanted to. And I felt like that was like pretty, like I felt, it made me feel like kind of good, like good and more like relaxed sort of thing, like refreshed. And the other thing that I noticed too is that, so I have been doing like virtual online workouts with my trainer where she can see me. So I can't like take a nap and like lie on the ground or anything like that. But so she texted me a list of things that I should be doing. So I did them one day, in the afternoon. And after that, I thought like, you know what, like it was like a 30-minute or so workout. I thought, you know what, like I really need to start stretching more because that's something that, I'm really like tight in my legs, especially from sitting, like desk job. All of us, I feel like probably have that problem. So she had mentioned to me like you should really like stretch your hamstrings more, like that kind of stuff. So I turned on some like meditative spa music and I just like stretched for like 20 minutes. And then even that I felt, I mean, it made me feel very like kind of more like reconnected, like relaxed after the workout, because like the workout was pretty crazy too, but but it did help.
Yeah, I think that's really important to connect and feel connected, and that's what this conversation is all about, right? The sense of community, people that you have around you. It's really important, and it's been proven in studies that it can actually help you live longer. You know a little bit about that, right?
Yep. So, I mean, having a community, especially when you get older, like people who you can be around, help check on you, who you're interacting with regularly, and having those like social connections, ultimately, is what community is about. I mean, right now, we're in our 30s. Like, community might be a little bit different for us today, but 50 years from now, it could just be, other people we hang out with that are retired. I don't know. But regardless of what it is, I do think it's important at different stages of our lives. Like I mentioned before, it can evolve and change over time, just depending on where we're at, what we're going through, and who we normally are around on like a regular basis. But I do think, that kind of brings us full circle with this conversation of having community, but also realizing you need to take time for yourself. But then, come back and join up with everybody else, right? Like making sure that, all those things are being taken care of so that you can ultimately focus on your well-being and make sure that, you're doing good, getting stress relief and, talking with friends.
Yeah, 100%. And please let us know what you're doing to stay connected. We are in unprecedented times, as I keep hearing, and it's true. So, how are you staying connected in this time? Let us know, and let us know if you have a different perspective on your sense of community and what you consider that to be, and in all different aspects, the family arena, your professional life, and with your friends, because we want to hear from you. But that's it for us. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Outright Effect. You can find us at theoutrighteffect.com. Follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram and Facebook at The Outright Effect, or email us at theoutrighteffect@gmail.com. See you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.